Life doesn't ask permission before it throws obstacles in your path. One moment, everything is steady, your plans, your progress, your confidence, and the next, you're staring down a challenge so massive it feels like the ground has vanished beneath you. Maybe it's a career setback that blindsided you, a personal loss that left you reeling, or a goal that seems impossible no matter how hard you push. These aren't just inconveniences, they're tests. And how you respond in these moments defines everything. But here's the truth, you don't have to face them unprepared. 2,000 years ago, the ancient Stoics mastered the art of turning adversity into fuel, and their wisdom is just as powerful today as it was in the courts of Rome. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled an empire amid chaos, put it bluntly, the obstacle is the way, not a detour, not a punishment the way. The very thing standing in your path becomes the training ground for your strength, your clarity, and your unbreakable resolve. This isn't about positive thinking or waiting for things to get easier. Stoicism is a mindset forged in action, a toolkit for those who refuse to be victims of circumstance. Imagine having the ability to control your perception, to see obstacles not as threats but as opportunities to prove yourself. Picture cultivating relentless focus, cutting through distractions like a blade through fog. And most crucially, think about the power of unshakable discipline, the kind that keeps you moving forward even when every instinct screams to quit. These aren't abstract ideas, they're Stoic weapons, battle-tested by emperors, generals, and modern-day warriors alike. They're the difference between crumbling under pressure and rising stronger because of it. So if you're ready to stop being at the mercy of life's chaos and start dominating every obstacle in your path, you're in the right place. This isn't just philosophy, it's a blueprint for action. Over the next minutes, we're diving deep into the core principles that will rewire how you face challenges, from the daily frustrations to the life-altering trials. You'll learn how to harness perception like a strategist, sharpen focus like a surgeon, and cultivate discipline that borders on obsession. Because the world doesn't reward those who hope for easier conditions. It rewards those who command their own minds, no matter what stands in their way. Let's begin. Think about the last time something didn't go your way, a project that failed, a plan that unraveled, a door that slammed shut. Your first reaction was probably frustration, maybe even anger. That's natural, but here's where most people get stuck. They see the obstacle as the enemy. Stoics like Epictetus flipped that script entirely. He taught that obstacles aren't just random hurdles, they're mirrors. They show you exactly where your strength needs to grow, where your focus needs to sharpen. It's like a blacksmith working with raw steel. The hammer doesn't destroy the metal, it shapes it. Every strike, every moment of heat and pressure transforms something rough into something unbreakable. That's what obstacles do for you. They're not there to break you, they're there to forge you. Take a second to reframe the last challenge you faced. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" try asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Maybe that missed promotion revealed a skill you need to develop. Maybe that disagreement with a friend highlighted a boundary you need to set. The Stoics called this the discipline of perception, the ability to see beyond the surface of a problem and find the hidden advantage. Marcus Aurelius didn't groan when his empire was threatened by war or plague. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Here's a practical way to start training this mindset. Grab a journal and answer this prompt: what recent setback disguised a lesson? Be brutally honest. Did you lose your temper? That's a signal to practice patience. Did you procrastinate on a goal? That's a cue to examine your discipline. The obstacle isn't the end of the road, it's the signpost pointing you toward growth. And the more you practice this shift, the more you'll catch yourself leaning into challenges instead of resenting them. Because once you realize obstacles are the curriculum, not the punishment, you stop fighting the world and start learning from it. Picture standing at the helm of a company when the stock market suddenly collapses. Panic spreads like wildfire, employees are scared, investors are furious, and competitors smell blood in the water. Most leaders would see disaster, but a Stoic CEO sees something else entirely, a test of clarity. They can't control the crashing numbers, the headlines, or the fear swirling around them. What they can control is how they interpret the crisis, and that changes everything. This is the Stoic dichotomy of control in action, the razor-sharp distinction between what's within your power and what isn't. Seneca put it perfectly: we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The market crash isn't the problem, the meaning you assign to it is. Think about your own life. How much energy do you waste raging against traffic jams, weather delays, or other people's opinions? These are external events, and no amount of frustration will bend them to your will. But your response, that's your domain. A delayed flight becomes wasted time only if you choose to see it that way, or it could be an unexpected gift, an hour to read, to think, to breathe. The event itself is neutral. The power lies in your perception. Here's a challenge. Identify one situation this week where a simple shift in perspective could turn frustration into fuel. Maybe it's a critical coworker. Instead of seeing them as a nuisance, what if they're unintentionally highlighting a blind spot in your work? Or a cancelled plan instead of disappointment? Could it be space for something better? The Stoics didn't just preach this idea, they lived it. When the Emperor Nero ordered Seneca to take his own life, the philosopher didn't scream about the injustice. He controlled the one thing left to him, his dignity. He calmly gathered his loved ones, shared wisdom, and met his end with purpose. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending hardship doesn't hurt. It's about reclaiming agency. Every obstacle hands you a choice. Will you let it dictate your state of mind, or will you wield perception like a tool? Because the world doesn't shape you, your interpretation of the world does. And once you grasp that, no setback can ever truly break you. It can only reveal how strong you've always been. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the key to mastery is action without distraction. Not just doing more, but doing what matters with absolute precision. Today, we call it deep work, but the Stoics were practicing it centuries ago. They understood something modern productivity gurus often miss. Focus isn't about cramming more tasks into your day. It's about stripping away everything that doesn't serve your purpose. Think of an Olympic sprinter in the starting blocks. Their entire world narrows to the track ahead, the rhythm of their breath, the explosive potential of their muscles. They're not checking emails or mentally rehearsing tomorrow's errands. That single-minded clarity isn't just for athletes, it's the Stoic secret to crushing obstacles. Now contrast that with how most of us operate. We wear multitasking like a badge of honor, convinced that juggling 5 things at once makes us productive. But here's the truth: the brain doesn't multitask, it switches tasks badly. Every time you toggle between your work report and a buzzing group chat, you're not saving time. You're burning it. Research shows it takes nearly 25 minutes to regain full focus after an interruption. The Stoics would have scoffed at this. Seneca didn't write his letters while half listening to gladiator games. Epictetus didn't teach philosophy with one eye on his social calendar. They knew that diluted effort creates mediocre results. So how do you bridge ancient wisdom and modern chaos? Start by identifying your version of the sprinter's lane. the one task that, if done exceptionally well, would change everything. Then ruthlessly eliminate what doesn't belong there. When Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one," he wasn't inviting debate. He was demanding action. Apply that to your goals. If you're writing a book, silence your phone and write. If you're building a business, block out the noise and build. Distractions will always scream for attention. Discipline whispers to ignore them. Here's your challenge. Eliminate one trivial pursuit this week. Not 10, not a complete life overhaul, just one. Maybe it's that endless scroll through social media first thing in the morning, or the habitual checking of news alerts that leaves you agitated but no wiser. Replace it with 20 minutes of undivided attention on something meaningful. Notice how the quality of your work and your calm shifts, because Stoic focus isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right thing with everything you've got. And when you do, obstacles don't just become manageable, they become stepping stones. Fear isn't a monster, it's a mirage. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. They didn't just face fear, they dissected it, exposing its hollow core long before it could paralyze them. Their secret. A practice called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Imagine walking into a battle already having played out every possible outcome in your mind: defeat, pain, even death. By the time the fight begins, fear has nothing left to threaten you with. This isn't pessimism, it's psychological armor, and no one wore it better than Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood alone against Julius Caesar's tyranny. When Caesar's armies closed in, when Rome's elites bowed in silence, Cato didn't flinch. He chose death over compromise, not because he wanted to die, but because he'd already accepted it as a possibility years earlier. His defiance wasn't impulsive, it was rehearsed. Now fast forward to today. Every entrepreneur staring down a pitch meeting, every artist facing rejection, every athlete risking failure, they're all confronting the same ancient adversary, the fear of the unknown. But here's the modern twist. Silicon Valley's most resilient founders don't just hope for success, they plan for failure. They ask, what if no one invests? What if the product flops? By mentally walking through the worst-case scenario, they strip it of its power. Suddenly, rejection isn't a catastrophe, it's data. A no doesn't destroy them, it refines their next move. Try this exercise. Pick a fear gnawing at you right now: public speaking, a career leap, a difficult conversation. Now ask, what's the absolute worst that could happen? Not the vague dread, but the concrete outcome. You stumble during the presentation, the job application gets rejected. The conversation turns tense. Write it down. Then, crucially, ask, could I survive that? Not just endure, adapt. Because here's what you'll discover. Most fears crumble under scrutiny. The worst case is almost never fatal. It's often just uncomfortable, inconvenient, or temporary. That's the Stoic edge. When you preempt fear, you're not surrendering to it, you're disarming it. Seneca put it bluntly, we are more often frightened than hurt. The monster under the bed vanishes when you turn on the light. So the next time anxiety whispers, what if this goes wrong? Answer it, play out the scenario, then ask yourself, and then what? You'll find the answer isn't a dead end, it's a detour, and detours don't break you, they redirect you. That's how courage is built, not by avoiding fear, but by walking through it, eyes wide open. There's a reason the most unshakable leaders seem unfazed when disaster strikes. They've already lived through it in their minds. This is the power of negative visualization, the Stoic practice Seneca called premeditatio malorum. It's not about dwelling on doom. It's about inoculating yourself against panic by rehearsing resilience in advance. Picture a seasoned pilot running through emergency procedures before takeoff. They're not expecting the engine to fail. they're ensuring they'll react with precision if it does. That's the Stoic mindset in action. Take a job loss, one of modern life's most visceral fears. Most people avoid even thinking about it until it happens, leaving them scrambling in the shock of the moment. But someone trained in negative visualization walks through the scenario long before it's real. If I lost my job tomorrow, what's step 1? Update my resume. Step 2, reach out to my network. Step 3, explore freelance opportunities. By mapping the rebuild process in advance, they strip the crisis of its emotional charge. The blow still stings, but it doesn't paralyze, because here's the truth: fear thrives in the unknown. When you shine a light on the path through adversity, you're not inviting disaster, you're disarming it. This practice isn't just theoretical. Studies show that people who mentally prepare for setbacks recover faster, make clearer decisions, and even experience less physical stress. Why? Because visualization isn't passive worrying, it's active problem solving. The ancient Stoics understood this instinctively. Seneca would deliberately practice poverty, wearing rough clothes and eating simple meals to remind himself that comfort wasn't guaranteed. He wasn't punishing himself, he was proving he could thrive with less. Here's how to put this into practice today. Set a timer for 5 minutes and choose one challenge you dread facing: a financial setback, a health scare, a professional rejection. Now walk through it like a drill. What's the first thing I'd do? Who could I lean on? What resources do I already have? The goal isn't to dwell on pain, but to uncover your hidden strengths. You'll likely realize 2 things. First, the worst-case scenario is rarely as catastrophic as your imagination paints it. Second, you're far more resourceful than you give yourself credit for. Negative visualization isn't about expecting the worst, it's about trusting yourself to handle it. When you rehearse resilience, you're not waiting for life to go wrong. You're ensuring that no matter what happens, you'll meet it with clarity, not chaos. And that's the ultimate advantage, the unshakable certainty that you've already won the mental battle before it begins. What if every setback, every heartbreak, every failure wasn't just something to endure, but something to love? The Stoics called this Amor Fati, the love of fate. It's not passive acceptance, it's not gritting your teeth and bearing it. It's looking at the very thing that crushes you and saying, "This too is part of my story, and I choose to embrace it." Nietzsche, the philosopher who famously declared, "God is dead," stole this idea straight from Stoicism when he wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity." But no one embodied this more brutally than Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz. While surrounded by unimaginable suffering, he made a discovery. Even in the camps, prisoners who found meaning, who saw their suffering as a test of their humanity, were more likely to survive. Frankl didn't just endure the horror, he used it. Later, he wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." That's the razor's edge between victimhood and ownership. The victim asks, "Why me?" The Stoic asks, "What now?" Think of a sailor caught in a storm. They can't control the wind, but they can adjust the sails. Every obstacle becomes a chance to practice that pivot, to turn resistance into direction. Take a moment to rewrite one of your past failures, not as a defeat, but as a necessary detour. Maybe that layoff forced you to build the business you'd always dreamed of. Maybe that broken relationship taught you boundaries you now enforce unapologetically. The Stoics didn't just tolerate fate, they married it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it." Here's your challenge. Pick one event from your past that still feels like an open wound. Now, write 2 sentences. The first starts with, This broke me because the second begins. This built me because the difference between those answers is where your power lies. Because loving fate doesn't mean pretending pain doesn't hurt. It means trusting that every stumble, every fall, every wrong turn is carving you into someone tougher, wiser, and more alive than you were before. The obstacle isn't just the way, it's the forge, and the more you embrace its heat, the sharper you become. The ancient Stoics didn't just philosophize about resilience, they trained it like athletes preparing for battle. Epictetus, the philosopher who began life as a slave, drilled his students with mental exercises so rigorous they'd make modern Navy SEAL nod in respect. While SEAL endure hell-week sleep deprivation, freezing swims, relentless physical torment, Stoics practiced something subtler but equally brutal: voluntary discomfort. Cold showers before dawn, skipping meals to master hunger, wearing thin robes in winter to confront the sting of the elements. These weren't acts of self-punishment. They were stress tests for the soul, proving one unshakable truth: comfort is negotiable, but your will isn't. Consider the SEAL 40% rule, the idea that when your mind screams you're done, you've only tapped 40% of your capacity. Stoics called this the reserve clause, the understanding that your limits are illusions waiting to be shattered. Both philosophies share the same core: resilience isn't inherited, it's forged through deliberate, daily friction. A Navy recruit doesn't wait for war to build endurance, they train in peacetime. Likewise, Epictetus didn't wait for catastrophe to practice courage, he staged it. Let death and exile and all terrible things appear before your eyes every day, he urged, not to dwell in fear but to disarm it. Here's where modern science catches up to ancient wisdom. Researchers at the University of Buffalo found that people who regularly expose themselves to mild stressors, cold exposure, fasting, intense exercise, develop what's called stress inoculation. Their brains rewire to interpret discomfort as a challenge, not a threat. It's the biological version of Epictetus' teaching. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The cold shower you force yourself to take isn't just building grit. It's reprogramming your nervous system to face bigger battles with the same calm. This week, borrow the Stoic Gladiator's playbook. Pick one voluntary discomfort and sit with it daily. No distractions, no shortcuts. Maybe it's turning off the heater in your car for your commute, or leaving your phone behind on a walk. Notice the initial resistance, the itch to retreat to ease, then lean in. That moment when you stop fighting the cold and start observing it, that's the pivot point. That's where you learn the difference between enduring pain and transcending it. Because the goal isn't to love suffering, it's to prove to yourself that suffering doesn't own you. And once you know that, truly know it, no obstacle can ever hold you hostage again. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a brutal reminder in his private journal: you own your silence. Not your words, not your outbursts, your silence. Because every complaint you verbalize isn't just air, it's a tiny surrender, a drop of power leaking from your resolve. Picture a surgeon mid-operation when the monitor starts blaring, a crashing heart rate, plummeting blood pressure. They don't waste breath cursing the equipment or blaming the anesthesiologist. Their hands keep moving, their focus locks deeper. That's Stoic silence in action, energy redirected from useless noise to decisive action. Now contrast that with how most people handle minor frustrations. The coworker who groans about Monday mornings, the friend who narrates every inconvenience like a tragic play. Each gripe seems harmless, but collectively they wire the brain for victimhood. Neuroscience confirms this. Vocalizing negativity reinforces neural pathways, making pessimism the default setting. The Stoics knew this instinctively. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his slavery into a masterclass on inner freedom, warned, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." Explanation is static, action is momentum. Here's the challenge: go 24 hours without verbalizing a single complaint. Not about traffic, not about weather, not about that person who microwaves fish in the office kitchen. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about auditing them. When you bite back a complaint, you create space to ask, is this worth my energy? Most aren't. The ancient Spartans perfected this. While other Greek city-states debated strategy, Spartan warriors trained in wordless discipline. Their reputation alone, that they could endure anything without protest, made enemies hesitate. Your silence has the same power. Every unspoken complaint is a brick in your mental fortress. Start small. Catch yourself mid-grumble and pivot. Instead of, "This meeting is pointless," try, "What's one useful thing I can contribute?" Swap "I'm exhausted" for "What's draining me and how do I fix it?" Language shapes reality. The Stoics didn't avoid discomfort, they reframed it. Cold wasn't awful, it was a test of endurance. Hunger wasn't suffering, it was a reminder of resilience. Your turn, that delayed flight, a chance to read, the critical email, feedback in disguise. By the end of your silent 24 hours, you'll notice two shifts. First, how few things actually merit outrage. Second, how much energy you've reclaimed, energy that can now fuel solutions, not sermons. Because Stoicism isn't about having no reactions, it's about choosing which reactions deserve a voice. And when you master that, you don't just endure obstacles, you outclass them. Seneca's words cut deeper now than ever. Life is long if you know how to use it. 2,000 years later, we've mastered the art of wasting it. Think about your phone's screen right now. How many hours this week vanished into the void of endless scrolling? Here's the brutal math. If you spend just 2 hours a day on social media, that's 730 hours a year. Over a decade, you've surrendered 3 full years of your life to mindless tapping. 3 years, that's enough time to master a language, build a business, write a novel, or watch your children grow up while you stare at a screen. Seneca called this poverty of attention, and it's the silent thief of every modern life. But here's what's even more damning. We don't just waste time, we lie to ourselves about it. We say we're relaxing or staying informed, but deep down we know the truth. Those dopamine hits from likes and notifications aren't nourishment, they're anesthesia. The Stoics didn't have algorithms hijacking their focus, but they understood distraction's corrosive power. Seneca wrote on the shortness of life, not as a lament but as a battle cry. His message was simple: you don't lack time, you lack clarity. The person who claims they're too busy to learn a skill, yet spends evenings binge-watching shows, isn't strapped for hours. They're confused about priorities. Let's make this painfully personal. Imagine your last day on Earth arrives tomorrow, not in some abstract philosophical sense tomorrow. What unfinished business claws at your gut? Is it the book you never wrote, the apology you never made, the adventure you kept postponing? That's not hypothetical regret, it's your subconscious screaming directions. The Stoics practiced Memento Mori, remembering death, not to morbidly obsess over the end, but to shock themselves into action. When Steve Jobs stood in front of Stanford's graduating class and said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered," he was channeling Seneca. Death isn't the enemy forgotten priorities are. So here's the antidote. Conduct a time audit like your life depends on it, because it does. For 1 week, track every hour like a forensic accountant. How much goes toward creation versus consumption? How many minutes are spent on what truly matters versus what merely numbs? Then, the decisive move: prune ruthlessly. Delete one app that adds no value. Schedule 2 hours each week for that neglected passion. Say no to trivial obligations that drain your days, Seneca's harshest truth. You act like mortals in all that you fear and like immortals in all that you desire. Stop waiting for someday. The clock's ticking was never the problem. Your refusal to hear it was. Success has a funny way of turning into poison if you're not careful. Think about it: how many people start with hunger and grit, only to become bloated with ego the moment they taste victory. The Stoics saw this trap coming 2,000 years ago. Musonius Rufus, the philosopher who taught Epictetus, warned that arrogance is the quickest way to undo progress. He drilled his students with a brutal truth: you are not as important as you think, not to crush their spirit but to keep them sharp, because the moment you believe your own hype, you stop growing. You stop listening, and that's when the fall begins. Look at Elon Musk's relentless work ethic versus the celebrity culture obsessed with self-promotion. Musk sleeps on factory floors to solve production bottlenecks, while influencers rent private jets for Instagram photos. One mindset builds rockets, the other builds fragile personas. The difference: humility in ambition. The Stoics didn't reject success, they rejected the delusion that success makes you invincible. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling the Roman Empire, wrote reminders like, "You're just a shadow of a shadow." Not because he lacked confidence, but because he knew power corrupts when left unchecked. Here's the test: when was the last time you actively sought criticism? Not the polite feedback from a friend, but the uncomfortable truth that stings. Most people avoid it like a threat. That's the ego's defense mechanism. It equates criticism with attack. But the Stoics reframed it as oxygen for growth. Seneca welcomed critics, saying, "Show me what I'm missing," not as performative humility, but as strategic rigor. He knew every pointed critique was a mirror showing blind spots he couldn't afford to ignore. Your challenge this week is simple and uncomfortable. Ask one person you trust, "What's one thing I could improve?" Then here's the hard part: don't argue, don't explain, just listen. Maybe it's your tendency to interrupt or your habit of dismissing ideas too quickly. Whatever it is, sit with it, wrestle with it, because the ego hates nothing more than admitting weakness, but strength lies in that admission. The founder who ignores employee feedback loses talent. The artist who dismisses critique stagnates. The leader who silences dissent builds castles on sand. Ambition without humility is just noise. The Stoics didn't chase success to fill a void. They pursued excellence as a duty. When Musonius Rufus said, "Practice wanting little," he wasn't preaching poverty. He was teaching immunity to fame, to flattery, to the addictive rush of external validation. Real power doesn't come from being untouchable. It comes from being unshakable, even when the world tries to crown you or cut you down. So let them call you relentless. Just never let them call you finished. Pain doesn't ask permission, it invades. A shattered bone, a broken heart, a betrayal that leaves you gasping for air. Most people see pain as the enemy, something to numb, avoid, or escape. But the Stoics saw it differently. Pain isn't just a sensation, it's a signal. A relentless professor pointing at the exact spot where your growth is waiting. Take James Stockdale, the Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam and held as a prisoner of war for 7 years. Beaten, starved, locked in solitary confinement, he didn't just survive, he transformed. His torturers broke his body, but Stockdale used the pain to forge something unbreakable. A clarity of purpose so sharp it became his weapon. Later, he credited Epictetus. "Stoicism taught me that pain is information. The chains around my ankles were real, but the chains in my mind were optional." Here's the radical shift. Pain isn't happening to you, it's communicating with you. A sprained ankle screams to slow down. A gut punch rejection whispers to refine your approach. Even grief, the heaviest of all teachers, carries lessons about what and who truly matters. The Stoics called this prohesis, the power to choose your interpretation. Two people can endure the same physical agony. One crumbles into "why me?" The other asks, "What's this revealing?" The pain is identical, the outcome isn't. Stockdale's prison cell became his classroom. Between beatings, he'd study his captors' tactics, not to fuel hatred, but to uncover their weaknesses. He noticed guards relied on unpredictability, random torture, erratic meals, to breed despair, so he weaponized routine. He'd do mental math exercises at the same time each day. He'd recite Stoic passages as they whipped him. By controlling his inner world, he turned their chaos into his curriculum. The pain didn't diminish, it became data. Your turn, grab a notebook and complete this sentence. My current discomfort is trying to teach me. Maybe it's that chronic back pain urging you to finally fix your posture. Maybe it's the simmering resentment in a relationship exposing a boundary you've neglected. Don't just jot it down, interrogate it. If your knee aches every time you run, the lesson isn't "stop running." It's "strengthen your hips" or "check your form." Emotional pain works the same way. That colleague who triggers you, they're spotlighting a wound you haven't healed. The anxiety before a big presentation, it's not a sign to quit, it's a reminder to prepare more deliberately. This isn't about glorifying suffering, it's about mining it for meaning. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Every rep counts, every sting carries intelligence. The moment you start treating pain as a messenger, not a monster, you unlock Stoic alchemy, the power to turn leaden agony into golden wisdom." And that's a skill no one can ever take from you. Tim Ferriss once asked a question that would make most people squirm. What would this look like if it were easy? Now pair that with Seneca's scathing indictment of busyness. Being busy is a form of laziness, lazy thinking. Together, they reveal the modern productivity paradox. We chase efficiency while drowning in self-created complexity. The Stoics didn't have inboxes or endless meetings, but they understood time thieves better than any productivity guru. Seneca's letters are littered with warnings about occupied idleness, those who fill days with motion but produce nothing of substance. Today, we call it performative productivity. Let's autopsy 3 common time drains disguised as progress. First, the planning fallacy. You spend hours color-coding calendars, researching apps, creating elaborate systems, all to avoid starting the actual work. The Stoics would have called this friction theater. Marcus Aurelius didn't journal to perfect his stationary setup. He scrawled raw truths on whatever parchment was nearby. Second, meeting addiction. The average professional wastes 31 hours monthly in unproductive meetings. Epictetus would have scoffed, "If you have nothing to say, why gather?" Third, tool obsession. Switching between 10 apps to optimize workflow while your actual output flatlines. Musonius Rufus taught with a wooden stool and open sky, no slides, no subscriptions, no clutter. Here's the ruthless audit. Grab paper and pen. No apps, no bullet journals, analog forces honesty. Draw 3 columns, label them activity, illusion, reality. Now list 3 things eating your hours that feel productive but aren't. Maybe it's scrolling industry news that never impacts decisions, or rewriting already clear emails for imagined perfection. The illusion column names the lie you tell yourself, "I'm researching." The reality column states the hard truth, "I'm avoiding hard decisions." Ferris' 4-hour workweek isn't about laziness, it's about leverage. The Stoics didn't meditate for hours to check a box, they did it to sharpen their edge. When Seneca said, "Life is long if you know how to use it," he wasn't advocating idleness, he was demanding intentionality. So here's your pivot. For every item on that list, ask, what's the simplest version of this that still delivers 90% of the value? That podcast you listen to for learning, cut it to 15 minutes of curated highlights. That weekly report no one reads, swap it for 3 bullet points in a Slack thread. The goal isn't to do more with less time, it's to do less, period. Because when you strip away the busyness theater, you uncover what the Stoics treasured: otium negotiosum, leisure with purpose. Not idle hours, but space for what truly moves the needle. Your calendar is a battleship, not a storage unit. Every item that doesn't serve your philosophy gets tossed overboard. That's how 4 hours can outwork 40, not by moving faster, but by refusing to move at all unless it matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." But here's the problem: your soul doesn't have a mute button for notifications. The average person checks their phone 144 times a day. That's once every 6.5 minutes. Compare that to Seneca, who would spend entire weeks in solitude writing, "No man can live happily who regards himself alone." He wasn't advocating isolation, he was training focus. Because here's what no one tells you about distraction. It doesn't just steal your time, it rewires your brain. Studies show that heavy social media users exhibit neural patterns similar to substance dependence. Every ping, every scroll, every dopamine hit is a gladiator in the digital coliseum, and your attention is the prize. Imagine Marcus Aurelius handed an iPhone. Would he doom scroll through celebrity gossip or compulsively refresh likes? Unlikely. When he said, "Withdraw into yourself," he meant something radical. Create a mental citadel no algorithm can breach. The Stoics didn't have apps, but they faced their own version of attention hijackers: public games, political gossip, the chatter of the Roman Forum. Their solution: deliberate disconnection. Epictetus warned, "If you don't control your attention, others will." He didn't mean avoid the world, he meant master your presence within it. Consider the data. Human attention spans have dropped from 12 seconds in 2000 to just 8 seconds today, shorter than a goldfish's. Meanwhile, Stoic texts demand sustained focus. Seneca's letters to Lucilius weren't tweet-length maxims. They were dense, layered arguments meant to be read slowly, then revisited. The modern mind, fractured by infinite tabs and infinite swipes, struggles to digest them. That's not coincidence, it's consequence. Every time you split focus between a podcast, a text thread, and a work document, you're not multitasking. You're teaching your brain to crave fragmentation. Here's your challenge: delete one app for 48 hours. Not deactivate, not hide, delete. Choose the platform that feels most like an itch you can't stop scratching. The goal isn't to demonize technology, it's to expose its grip. Notice what happens in that void. Do your fingers reflexively reach for the missing icon? Does boredom feel uncomfortable or surprisingly fertile? Those moments of discomfort are the cracks where Stoic focus grows. When Seneca advised, "Associate with those who will improve you," he wasn't just talking about people. He meant every input, every stimulus, every digital whisper competing for your soul. The first 12 hours will feel like withdrawal. The next 12 might bring clarity. By hour 48, you'll glimpse something ancient, your mind without synthetic urgency. That's the Stoic edge, not rejecting the modern world, but entering it on your terms. Because the person who can disconnect at will holds an advantage no algorithm can replicate: the ability to think, uninterrupted, in a world addicted to interruption. The first light of dawn was Marcus Aurelius' secret weapon. While Rome slept, the emperor sat with his journal, candle flickering, turning chaos into clarity before the day could interrupt. This wasn't just a habit, it was a siege against weakness. He'd plunge into frigid baths not because he enjoyed the shock, but because it proved comfort wouldn't own him. Compare that to today's epidemic of snooze button slavery hitting pause on life before it even begins. The Stoic morning ritual wasn't about productivity hacks, it was a daily reconquest of the mind. Modern science backs this ancient discipline. Researchers at Harvard found that people who wake before 6 a.m. report higher focus and lower stress levels. But here's what they don't tell you. It's not the early hour that matters, it's what you do with the silence. Most people squander their mornings scrolling through yesterday's digital debris. A Stoic treats those first 60 minutes like sacred ground. No emails, no news, no voices except their own thoughts. Marcus didn't check how the empire fared overnight. He asked, "What virtue will I practice today?" That's the pivot point, starting the day by design, not default. Let's dismantle the myth that Stoic rituals require Spartan suffering. You don't need ice baths, though they help. The core is pattern interruption, breaking the autopilot that keeps you soft. Try this 5 a.m. blueprint. First, 90 seconds of deliberate discomfort. Splash your face with cold water, hold an ice cube, stand barefoot on cold tile. You're not punishing yourself, you're rebooting your nervous system to handle bigger stresses. Next, 10 minutes of journaling, not diary entries, but battle plans. Write one sentence answering, "What's the one thing I'd regret not doing today?" Finally, 20 minutes of focused learning, no highlights, no skimming. Read Seneca's letters or study a complex manual. Depth trains discipline, snippets train distraction. The snooze button is more than a button, it's a metaphor. Every time you delay waking, you're rehearsing avoidance. The Stoics called this acrasia, the gap between intention and action. Neuroscientists found that snoozers experience sleep inertia, fogging their brains for hours. Compare that to Navy SEAL, who rise at 4:30 not because they have to, but because it programs dominance over impulse. Your morning isn't just a routine, it's the first skirmish in the war for your potential. Win that, and the rest of the day falls into formation. Here's the ultimate test. For 1 week, reclaim your dawn. Set the alarm for 30 minutes earlier, not to check notifications, but to own the quiet. Notice how the world feels slower, sharper. That's not magic, it's the Stoic advantage, because when you start the day as Marcus did, by confronting discomfort, clarifying purpose, and conquering distraction, you don't just face obstacles. You outmaneuver them before they wake. Epictetus had a razor-sharp rule for decision-making. Say yes or no at once. No waffling, no second-guessing, just clarity. He knew what modern science now confirms. Every choice you make drains mental energy, from what to eat for breakfast to which project to prioritize. By evening, your willpower is running on fumes. That's why Steve Jobs wore the same black turtleneck daily, not as a fashion statement, but as a cognitive shield. He eliminated trivial choices to preserve focus for the ones that mattered. The Stoics didn't have the term decision fatigue, but they mastered its antidote, ruthless simplicity. Consider the average day. You make around 35,000 decisions, most unconsciously. What to wear, what to eat, whether to check email now or later. Each micro-choice seems harmless, but collectively, they're mental death by 1,000 cuts. The Stoic solution: heuristics, mental shortcuts that automate repeat decisions. Marcus Aurelius started his mornings with a pre-written question: what virtue will I practice today? Not should I meditate, or what's on my schedule. The framework was set. All that remained was execution. Here's your battle plan for tomorrow. Automate 3 daily choices. Pick the ones that haunt you most. Maybe it's your midday snack, pack the same almonds every day. Maybe it's your workout, lay out your gym clothes the night before, same time, same routine. The key isn't rigidity, it's liberation. When psychologist Roy Baumeister studied willpower, he found it operates like a muscle. It tires with use. By scripting trivial decisions, you conserve energy for the battles worth fighting. Epictetus took this further with his discipline of assent, the practice of instantly accepting or rejecting impressions. Someone insults you, immediate choice. This says more about them than me. Next, a project feels overwhelming, instant filter. Can I control the next step? Yes, do it. No, release it. No committee meetings in your mind. No replaying scenarios. Just yes or no, then move. Try this tonight. Write down 3 decisions that drained you today. Then script tomorrow's version in 10 seconds or less. Lunch, chicken and rice. Afternoon break, 10-minute walk. Evening unwind, read, no screens. Like a Stoic operating system, these pre-loaded choices free up bandwidth for what truly demands your focus. Because the goal isn't to eliminate thinking, it's to eliminate wasteful thinking. And in that space between automated routines and deliberate choices, you'll find something rare, a mind unburdened enough to dominate. Seneca didn't mince words about toxic relationships. Avoid those who would drain you, for they are thieves of the soul. 2,000 years later, neuroscience confirms his intuition. Emotional vampires don't just exhaust you, they rewire your brain. Studies show prolonged exposure to negativity literally shrinks the hippocampus, the region responsible for memory and emotional regulation. Think about that coworker who turns every conversation into a complaint symphony, or the friend who texts only when they need a favor. Their toxicity isn't just annoying, it's altering your neural architecture. The Stoic solution wasn't passive tolerance, it was surgical detachment. When Seneca wrote, "Associate with those who will improve you," he wasn't suggesting elitism, he was prescribing survival. Modern boundaries often get mislabeled as selfishness, but Stoics saw them as self-preservation. Imagine your energy as a finite currency. Every interaction is either an investment or a withdrawal. That relative who belittles your ambitions, they're not just rude, they're bankrupting your emotional reserves. Marcus Aurelius handled this with brutal clarity. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. Notice he didn't say, change them. He said, prepare yourself, because toxic people rarely reform, but you can reform your proximity to them. Here's the litmus test. After spending time with someone, do you feel energized or depleted? If it's the latter, it's time for what the Stoics called amputatio, not hatred, but necessary removal. A Roman general wouldn't keep a rotting limb to avoid discomfort. They'd sever it to save the body. Apply that ruthlessness to relationships. That friend who's always in crisis but never takes advice. The partner who mocks your growth. Honor yourself too much to tolerate what Seneca called soul pollution. Your action step is surgical. Identify one energy vampire to limit this week. Not cut off abruptly unless necessary, but strategically reduce. Maybe it's muting their notifications, shortening calls, or declining guilt-tripped favors. When they protest, and they will, remember Epictetus. If someone tries to drag you into their storm, refuse to board their ship. Boundaries aren't walls, they're drawbridges. You lower them for those who respect your peace, and raise them against those who threaten it. Because the ultimate Stoic flex isn't enduring toxicity, it's recognizing you're too valuable to be anyone's emotional landfill. Musonius Rufus cut through the illusion of wealth with one brutal line. Poverty is the test of self-control, but wealth is the test of character. 2,000 years later, Warren Buffett still lives in the same modest Omaha home he bought in 1958 for $31,000, while Silicon Valley founders blow millions on super yachts they barely use. The difference isn't just bank balances, it's philosophy. Stoicism doesn't demonize money, it demystifies it. Money is fuel, not identity, a tool, not a trophy. And how you wield it reveals more about your discipline than your net worth ever could. Look at the modern obsession with luxury. Designer logos plastered on clothes that cost 10 times their utility. Cars leased to impress strangers at stoplights. Watches that tell time no better than your phone but scream status. The Stoics would have called this Veneta's empty display. Seneca mocked Romans who bought exotic marbles for private villas no one saw. You're rich not when you possess much, but when you no longer need to. Buffett embodies this. His billions could buy private islands, yet he eats McDonald's breakfasts and drives himself to work, not because he's cheap, because he's free. Free from the need to prove, to flaunt, to fill some invisible void with shiny objects. Here's the litmus test. Grab your bank statement and highlight every purchase from the last 24 hours. Not to judge, but to interrogate. That $12 artisanal coffee, did it spark joy or just habit? That impulse Amazon click, did it serve a purpose or patch boredom? The Stoics practiced voluntary poverty not to suffer, but to expose these leaks. When Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants," he wasn't advocating deprivation. He was teaching discernment. Try this audit for one day, track every dollar like a forensic accountant, then categorize each expense: survival groceries, rent, growth books, courses, joy experiences that truly light you up, and noise everything else. The noise column is your Stoic wake-up call. Those subscriptions you forgot about, the gym membership you never use, the upgrades you didn't need. That's not just money leaking. It's attention, energy, and freedom dissolving. The billionaire and the monk arrive at the same truth from opposite directions. Wealth's greatest luxury is the ability to ignore it. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but wrote, "You can live happily in a palace without guards or purple robes, not as austerity, but as liberation. Because when your spending aligns with your values instead of your insecurities, you don't just accumulate wealth, you transcend it." And that's the ultimate flex, being rich enough to stop keeping score. Cleans, the Stoic philosopher who carried water by day and debated wisdom by night, knew something modern gym culture often misses. Physical labor isn't just about building muscle, it's about forging mental resilience. While others paid for tutors, he funded his studies by hauling water for gardens, his hands calloused, his back bent under the weight. But here's what's fascinating, he didn't see this as a sacrifice. The labor was his education. Every drop of sweat was a reminder that philosophy isn't just debated in lecture halls. It's lived in the ache of effort, the grit of persistence. Fast forward to today, and science confirms what cleans. Embodied exercise isn't just a workout for the body, it's armor for the mind. Studies from Harvard to Stanford reveal that physical movement reduces anxiety more effectively than medication for many people. It's not about six-pack abs or marathon times, it's about biochemistry. When you push your body, you trigger a cascade of neurochemicals, endorphins, dopamine, BDNF, that literally rewire your brain to handle stress better. Think of it as Stoicism in motion. Just as Epictetus taught his students to reframe obstacles, exercise teaches your nervous system to reinterpret discomfort. That burning sensation in your lungs during a sprint, it's not suffering, it's strength under construction, the trembling exhaustion after lifting weights. Not punishment, proof of progress. Marcus Aurelius had a non-negotiable rule: One daily movement session, no excuses, not for vanity but for vitality. He'd wrestle, ride horses, or march with his troops, not to showcase his physique but to test his will. Modern Stoics adapt this commandment to their context. Maybe it's 50 push-ups before breakfast, a lunchtime walk without headphones, or a sunset swim. The form doesn't matter. The consistency does, because here's the secret: the physical act is just the vehicle. The real transformation happens in the discipline of showing up, especially when you don't feel like it, when it's raining, when you're tired, when the couch whispers your name. That's the moment you're not just training your body, you're training your character. Consider the Navy SEALs' notorious 40% rule. The idea that when your mind screams you're done, you've only tapped 40% of your capacity. Stoics called this the reserve clause, the untapped well of grit we forget exists. Physical exertion is the gateway to accessing it. When you force yourself to run that last mile or hold that plank for 10 more seconds, you're not just building endurance. You're proving to yourself that your limits are illusions, and that proof doesn't stay confined to the gym. It spills into your career, your relationships, your ability to face life's hurricanes unshaken. So here's the challenge. For the next 30 days, move with purpose, not for aesthetics, but for anti-fragility. No need for marathon training or expensive equipment. Start with 20 minutes of anything that elevates your heart rate: stair climbs, kettlebell swings, even vigorous gardening. The key is to pair motion with mindfulness. As your body works, let your mind recite Stoic mantras. This is where growth feels like resistance. Discomfort is the price of mastery, because when you marry physical exertion with mental discipline, you're not just exercising. You're conducting an alchemy that turns sweat into steel for both body and soul. Epictetus described the mind as a fortress with a gatekeeper, one who decides which thoughts and impulses get through and which get turned away. This isn't just poetic imagery, it's a battle-tested strategy for emotional control. Modern neuroscience confirms what the Stoics knew intuitively. There's a critical 10-second window between stimulus and response where you either master your reaction or become its prisoner. A landmark study of judges' parole decisions revealed this starkly. Before lunch, the approval rate was nearly zero. After eating, over 60%. The same facts, the same cases, but hunger hijacked their judgment. That's the power of unguarded reactions. Your emotions don't wait for logic's permission to act. But here's the good news: you can train that gatekeeper. Think of the last time someone cut you off in traffic or sent a snippy email. Your jaw clenched, your pulse spiked, maybe words flew out before you could catch them. That's the amygdala, your brain's alarm system, overriding rational thought. But between that spark and the explosion, there's a sliver of space. The Stoic 10-second rule exploits that gap. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about inserting a buffer between feeling and action. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "The first reaction is the natural one. The second is yours to control." He didn't pretend not to feel anger, he just refused to let it dictate his behavior. Here's how to weaponize those 10 seconds. When provoked today, whether by a rude comment, a frustrating delay, or your own inner critic, pause. Literally count to 10 in your head, not as a passive wait but as an active recalibration. Use each number to ask, is this worth my energy? What's the wise response? The first 3 seconds diffuse the physiological surge. The next 4 create space for reason. The final 3 let you choose your move, not just default to reflex. This isn't just ancient wisdom repackaged. Elite military units train recruits with a similar tactical pause before engaging threats. Surgeons use pre-incision checklists to override fatigue-induced errors. Even hostage negotiators employ structured silence to de-escalate crises. The mechanism is identical: interrupt autopilot, insert intention. Epictetus' Gatekeeper isn't a metaphor, it's a muscle. And like any muscle, it strengthens with repetition. Try this drill for one day: wear a rubber band on your wrist. Every time you feel a knee-jerk reaction brewing, annoyance, defensiveness, impatience, snap it lightly. The sting isn't punishment, it's a physical trigger to activate your 10-second rule. By sunset, you'll notice something profound. The space between event and response widens. The gatekeeper grows sharper, and obstacles that once derailed you become chances to practice what the Stoics called prohesis, the power to choose your next move. Because mastery isn't about never feeling provoked, it's about never being controlled by it. Marcus Aurelius never saw an Instagram feed, but he diagnosed its poison centuries in advance. Comparison is the thief of joy. Today, we don't just compare ourselves to neighbors or colleagues. We measure our lives against curated illusions. That vacation photo with perfect lighting. It took 43 attempts, the CEO's overnight success, a decade of invisible failures. Social media turned life into a highlight reel, and we're the audience torturing ourselves with someone else's edited script. But here's what the Stoics understood: no amount of external validation can fill the void of self-abandonment. When Marcus wrote, "Be your own savior and your own witness," he wasn't preaching isolation, he was offering liberation. Research from Princeton University exposes the absurdity of the comparison trap. Once basic needs are met, food, shelter, safety, additional income contributes almost nothing to long-term happiness. The billionaire isn't 10,000 times happier than the teacher. Yet we keep chasing phantom benchmarks, mistaking visibility for value. Look at professional athletes, their Instagrams gleam with trophies and private jets, but the suicide rate among retired players is 3 times the national average. The roar of the crowd fades, the medals tarnish. What remains is the relationship you have with yourself. That's why Stoicism doesn't waste energy on keeping up. It asks a different question: who would you be if no one was watching? This isn't hypothetical. Take James Stockdale again, the POW who survived by clinging to Epictetus' teachings. In solitary confinement, there were no followers to impress, no likes to collect. His worth wasn't determined by applause, but by the integrity of his thoughts. Contrast that with modern influencer culture, where self-worth fluctuates with algorithm whims. The Stoic alternative: define success internally before the world defines it for you. Your challenge is radical but simple. Grab paper and pen. At the top, write, "Success to me is." Then finish that sentence without referencing salary, titles, or other people's opinions. Maybe it's raising kind children, or creating art that moves one person deeply, or mastering my temper. This isn't a manifesto, it's a compass. When scrolling tempts you to compare, pull out that definition. The billionaire's yacht can't intimidate you if your metric is having Sundays free for hikes. The influencer's wardrobe means nothing if your joy comes from library books and home-cooked meals. Marcus' journal entries never bragged about imperial conquests. They tracked his progress in patience, humility, and self-control. His audience wasn't Rome, it was his conscience. That's the ultimate Stoic flex, deriving confidence not from being better than others, but from being better than yesterday's version of yourself. Because the only comparison that doesn't lie is the one staring back from the mirror each dawn. Seneca ended every day with a blade to his ego, not with self-flagellation, but with surgical honesty. As candles flickered in his study, he'd dissect his actions with 2 ruthless questions. Where did I weaken? Where did I stand firm? This wasn't diary writing, it was a battlefield debrief for the mind. Modern soldiers and CEOs now echo this practice, calling it an after-action review. The format is simple but brutal. 3 clear victories, 1 non-negotiable improvement. No fluff, no excuses, just the raw data of your humanity. Consider the difference between how most people end their day versus how a stoic warrior does. The average person collapses onto the couch, numbing the hours with streaming and scrolling. The stoic sits upright at a desk, even if that desk is a kitchen table or the edge of a bunk, and confronts the day's truth. Research from Harvard Business School reveals that professionals who journal for just 15 minutes nightly see a 23% performance increase within months. Not because they're documenting highlights, but because they're identifying patterns. That moment you snapped at a coworker, it wasn't an isolated incident. It was the 5th time this month impulsivity overruled patience. The extra hour you spent refining a project, that wasn't luck. It was discipline paying compound interest. Here's the template Seneca would approve. First, 3 victories. Not generic, I tried my best platitudes, but specific, hard-won wins. Stayed calm when the client rejected the proposal, counts. Finished the report before deadline despite interruptions, qualifies. These aren't trophies for participation, they're evidence of applied philosophy. Next, 1 improvement, not a vague, be better tomorrow, but a laser-focused adjustment. Interrupted less in meetings is measurable. Took 1 deep breath before responding to criticism is actionable. The key is asymmetry, 3 wins to 1 growth area, because Stoicism balances accountability with self-compassion. James Stockdale, the POW who survived by clinging to Epictetus' teachings, adapted this practice in his Hanoi Hilton cell. Each night, he'd mentally catalog, did I maintain dignity today? Did I give the gods no satisfaction? His victories weren't dramatic, sometimes just refusing to groan during torture. His improvements were microscopic. Next time, spit less when they strike. Yet these tiny calibrations built the resilience that outlasted his captors. Your turn. Tonight, grab any notebook or even a napkin and divide the page. On the left, today's battles won. On the right, tomorrow's terrain to conquer. No poetic prose required. Bullet points strike harder. The act of physically writing matters. Studies show handwriting engages the brain more deeply than typing, etching lessons into your neural pathways. And here's the stoic twist. When you record a victory, relive the moment, not to inflate your ego, but to hardwire the neural pathway that made it possible. That surge of pride when you resisted gossip, that's dopamine reinforcing moral courage. The ache of regret when you procrastinated, that's your conscience mapping the cost of avoidance. This ritual isn't about perfection, it's about progression. Seneca himself admitted failures in his letters. I am still angry, still greedy, still inconsistent. But the man who tracked his stumbles was the same man who advised Nero, survived exile, and penned timeless wisdom. His journal wasn't a confession booth, it was a training ground. And yours can be too, because the warrior who reviews the day's skirmishes by moonlight wakes ready to dominate the dawn. Airports and traffic jams don't just test your schedule, they test your philosophy. That moment when the gate agent announces another delay or brake lights stretch endlessly ahead, your pulse quickens, your jaw tightens. Most people see these as stolen time. A Stoic sees them as the perfect training ground, because mastery isn't built in grand gestures, it's forged in these micro moments of friction. Epictetus, who endured slavery, knew this intimately. Circumstances don't make the man, they reveal him. That bumper-to-bumper gridlock, it's not just traffic, it's a live-fire drill for your patience. Consider the science behind frustration. When your flight gets cancelled, your brain registers it as a threat, the same primal circuitry that flares up when a predator approaches. Cortisol floods your system, narrowing your focus to fight or flee. But here's the twist: you can't fight a delayed flight. You can't outrun a red light. What you can do is hijack that stress response and reroute it. The Stoics called this prosoch attention to your inner dialogue. Instead of muttering curses at the departures board, ask, what if this delay is a gift? Maybe it's 30 unexpected minutes to finally read Marcus Aurelius, or to observe strangers and practice empathy, or simply to sit still, a rarity in our frenetic world. James Stockdale, the POW who survived 7 years in Hanoi by clinging to Stoicism, turned his cell into a classroom. No books, no tools, just his mind. He'd spend hours reconstructing epic poems from memory or calculating square roots in his head. His captors controlled his body, but his attention was his own. You don't need a prison cell to train this skill. A subway delay works just as well. Try this next time you're stuck. Unlock your phone, not to doom scroll, but to jot down 3 things within your control right now. Your breath, your posture, your next thought, that's not just killing time, that's reclaiming it. Here's your 5-minute Stoic drill for chaos. Pick one daily frustration: the line at the coffee shop, the slow elevator, the coworker who rambles in meetings. Today, you'll weaponize it. First, name the resistance. I'm clenching my teeth because this feels like wasted time. Second, flip the script. This isn't theft, it's an invitation to pause. Third, deploy a micro-action. Memorize a quote while waiting. Practice deep breathing in the elevator. Listen actively instead of planning your rebuttal. The goal isn't to eliminate irritation, it's to alchemize it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the secret. Every delay, every detour, every daily annoyance is a chance to flex that power. Not in some distant future when life calms down, but right now in the chaos where it counts. Because the person who can turn a traffic jam into a meditation session or a cancelled flight into a thinking session doesn't just survive chaos, they command it. Marcus Aurelius had a mental trick for handling insults. He'd imagine himself floating high above the earth, watching the scene unfold like a distant spectator. From that vantage point, the words lost their sting. The person hurling insults shrank to the size of an ant, their voice fading into the hum of a chaotic world. He called this the view from above, and it wasn't just poetic imagery, it was a psychological lever. Modern neuroscience backs this up. When you mentally distance yourself from a provocation, you activate the prefrontal cortex, the brain's rational command center, instead of letting the amygdala hijack your response. That coworker's snide remark, the internet troll's crude jab, from 10,000 feet up, they're not personal attacks, they're just noise, like a dog barking behind a fence. Marcus wrote about this explicitly. When a dog barks, you don't take it personally. You recognize it's just what dogs do. So when people lash out, understand it's their nature, not your flaw. The Stoics didn't say this to dismiss pain, they were teaching discernment. A barking dog isn't plotting against you, it's reacting to its own fear, hunger, or training. Likewise, the person slinging insults is usually fighting a battle you can't see. Maybe they're insecure, exhausted, or trapped in a cycle of their own unresolved anger. Their words say more about their inner world than your worth. Here's the experiment. Next time someone throws a rude comment your way, whether it's a passive-aggressive email or a stranger's glare, let it pass unacknowledged. Not with bottled-up resentment, but with detached curiosity. Watch the urge to retaliate rise and fall like a wave. Notice how the insult loses power when you refuse to feed it oxygen. This isn't about playing the martyr, it's about reclaiming sovereignty over your attention. The ancient Spartans mastered this. When an Athenian philosopher hurled insults at a Spartan king, the king simply replied, "If I were angry, you'd know it." The insult died on impact. Try pairing this with physical grounding. When provoked, press your feet firmly into the floor and take 3 slow breaths. With each exhale, imagine yourself rising above the situation, watching it unfold from a mountaintop. The details blur, the voices quiet. What felt like a personal affront now seems small, even trivial. This isn't avoidance, it's perspective, because the ultimate power move isn't clapping back. It's realizing you don't have to. The barking dog will tire itself out. Your peace, that's yours to keep. Death doesn't negotiate, it simply arrives. The ancient Stoics didn't shy away from this truth. They weaponized it. They called it Memento Mori, the deliberate meditation on mortality. Picture a Roman general parading through the streets in triumph, basking in the roar of the crowd. Behind him, a slave stood whispering in his ear, "Remember, you are mortal." Not to kill the moment, but to sharpen it, because here's the paradox: confronting death isn't more, but it's the ultimate clarifier. When Steve Jobs stood in front of Stanford's graduating class and said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered," he wasn't channeling despair. He was echoing Seneca, who wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." Modern culture treats death like a glitch in the system, something to delay with anti-aging creams, ignore with endless distractions, or outsource to hospitals and funeral homes. The Stoics did the opposite. They held funerals for the living. Philosophers like Zeno would stage mock burials, lying still while friends eulogized them. The point wasn't theater, it was awakening. Imagine attending your own funeral today. What would people say? "She was great at answering emails. He binge-watched every season." Or would they speak of courage, kindness, creations that outlasted you? That gap between the epitaph you want and the life you're living, that's where Stoic motivation ignites. Try this exercise. Write your epitaph in 6 words or fewer. Not the polished version for Instagram, but the raw truth. "Here lies someone who played it safe." Or, "She built what scared her." The shock of seeing your choices distilled into a handful of words cuts through excuses like a scalpel. When Ryan Holiday titles his books "The Obstacle is the Way and Stillness is the Key," he's not crafting slogans, he's chiseling epitaph-worthy principles. Because legacy isn't built in the someday, it's built in the now that death could interrupt at any moment. Procrastination thrives in the illusion of endless time. Memento Mori shatters that illusion. The entrepreneur delaying their big idea, the artist hesitating to share their work, the parent putting off that tough conversation. They're not lacking time, they're lacking urgency. Admiral McRaven, the Navy SEAL who commanded the raid that killed Osama bin Laden, starts every morning with a simple question: "If today were my last day, would I be proud of how I lived it?" That's not a morbid mantra, it's a tactical filter, the same filter that guided Marcus Aurelius to write, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Here's the challenge. Place a physical reminder of mortality where you'll see it daily: a skull replica, a fallen leaf, even a sticky note with "Memento Mori" in bold letters. When you catch yourself mindlessly scrolling or hesitating on a bold move, let that object jolt you back, not to fear but to focus. The billionaire and the monk arrive at the same truth: wealth and meditation can't buy more time, only better use of it. So stop waiting for perfect conditions. The perfect condition is that you're alive right now, and that's the only guarantee you'll ever get. Imagine standing in front of 3 ancient books, each one a forge where resilience is hammered into existence. These aren't just texts, they're blueprints for building an unshakable mind. First, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. the journal of history's most powerful philosopher king, scribbled by candlelight between battles. Think of it as the original CEO playbook, but instead of growth hacks, it's packed with brutal self-interrogations. Is this necessary? What's the virtue here? Modern leaders like Bill Clinton and Tim Ferriss have carried dog-eared copies not for inspiration, but for course correction. Aurelius didn't write for publication. He wrote to survive the weight of an empire. That's the twist. Read it not as philosophy, but as a field manual for when life declares war on your peace. Then there's Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, the original mentor, in your pocket. Picture a first-century version of a startup founder's WhatsApp thread with his sharpest friend. Seneca's advice on handling betrayal. Expect it on managing wealth. It's a slave if you chase it, a tool if you master it. Silicon Valley's elite secretly apply his principles to pitch rejections and burnout. When a VC says no, it's not a dead end. It's letter 18 on overcoming obstacles. When stress mounts, it's letter 5 on the art of stillness. The modern twist: skip the archaic translations. Grab Robin Campbell's version. It reads like a seasoned founder dropping truth bombs over whiskey. But the true Stoic battering ram is Epictetus' discourses recorded by his student Arion, like a combat journalist documenting a mental boot camp. Born a slave, crippled by his master's brutality, Epictetus didn't just teach resilience, he was resilience. His central question cuts through 2 millennia of noise. What's within your control? Navy SEALs study this before deployments. Trauma therapists use it with PTSD patients. The modern hack: pair it with cognitive behavioral therapy worksheets. When Epictetus says, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them," he's outlining the same neural rewiring psychologists now prescribe. Here's how to weaponize these texts today. Don't read them cover to cover like novels. Tear them apart. Meditations belongs in your gym bag, one passage while stretching. Letters lives on your nightstand and one epistle before sleep. Discourses stays on your desk, highlighted like a legal brief for life's courtroom. The Stoics didn't write for academia, they wrote for the trenches. Their words only matter if they're smeared with the dirt of your daily battles. So crack the spines, scribble in the margins, and let these ancient warriors arm you for the modern fight. Because resilience isn't found, it's forged, and these books are your anvil. The Olympic podium isn't won in giant leaps, it's claimed through microscopic gains. British cycling coach Dave Brailsford proved this with his aggregation of marginal gains philosophy, where 1% improvements in everything from bike seats to sleep hygiene transformed underdogs into gold medalists. That's Stoic Kaizen in action, fusing Japanese continuous improvement with Epictetus' timeless truth that progress is not achieved by luck or accident, but by working on yourself daily. The Stoics didn't chase overnight transformations. They mastered the art of incremental mastery. Seneca wrote letters to Lucilius not as grand treatises, but as daily nudges, small adjustments to thinking, like a blacksmith tempering steel degree by degree. Consider how a sculptor works. They don't attack marble with a sledgehammer. They make 10,000 precise taps with a chisel. That's the 1% rule in stone. Now apply it to your mind. Want unshakable patience? Start by pausing 1 extra second before reacting to trivial annoyances. The barrister who gets your order wrong, the slow elevator. That's your first tap. Craving deeper focus? Read 5 minutes longer tonight than you did yesterday. That's another tap. The key isn't speed, it's consistency. Musonius Rufus taught that philosophy isn't about big talk, but small deeds, daily repetitions that compound like interest in the bank of character. Here's the real secret: 1% improvements bypass resistance. The brain revolts against drastic change. It triggers fear circuits evolved to avoid risk. But micro-adjustments slip under the radar. Navy SEAL use this in Hell Week. They don't tell recruits to survive 5 days of torture. They say, just make it to the next meal. Epictetus mirrored this. Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish, but wish for everything to happen as it does, and your life will go well. Translation: master the next minute before you fret about the year. Your challenge is surgical. Pick one skill, not 10, not even 2, just one. Maybe it's listening without interrupting or waking 5 minutes earlier. For 30 days, apply the 1% rule. Each evening, ask, did I sharpen this skill by 1 degree today? No heroic leaps required. Just a single deliberate repetition, a slight tweak in form. Record it like a scientist tracking data, because when you zoom out after a month, those 1% have compounded into 30% growth, and after a year, you're unrecognizable. The Stoics knew what modern science confirms. Willpower is finite, but systems are inexhaustible. The 1% rule isn't a tactic, it's an operating system for mastery. Whether you're an Olympian shaving milliseconds off a sprint or a parent practicing patience during tantrums, the law remains the same. Small disciplines repeated daily lead to big transformations. Not through force, but through the quiet, relentless power of compounding. And that's how ordinary people achieve extraordinary things, one deliberate tap at a time. Words are the invisible architecture of your reality. What you say doesn't just describe your world, it builds it. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into a masterclass on inner freedom, had a razor-sharp rule for speech. Never say I can't. Say I choose not to. At first glance, it seems like wordplay, but this linguistic shift is a psychological detonator. I can't is the language of victims. I choose not to is the dialect of sovereigns. One phrase traps you in circumstance, the other crowns you the author of your decisions. Take modern negotiations. Most people enter high-stakes conversations armed with statistics and spreadsheets, but Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator who defied Julius Caesar, knew better. His weapon wasn't data, it was diction. When corrupt officials tried to flatter him, he didn't stammer or soften his refusal. He replied with surgical precision, I find no pleasure in words I cannot respect. No apologies, no waffling, just truth honed to a blade. That's Stoic communication in action, every syllable calibrated to reflect inner conviction. Here's how to train this today. Grab a notebook and rewrite 3 weak statements you've used this week. That I'm swamped, maybe next time becomes I guard my focus for priorities right now. That this is impossible morphs into I haven't found the solution yet. This isn't about toxic positivity, it's about linguistic ownership. Stanford research shows that subtle language shifts like these reduce stress hormones by up to 23%. Why? Because passive phrasing tricks your brain into feeling powerless. Active voice rewires it for agency. Role-play a Cato-worthy exchange. Pick a scenario where you typically default to weak language, asking for a raise, setting boundaries with a pushy relative, even ordering at a restaurant when the kitchen gets your meal wrong. Rehearse the dialogue aloud, replacing every hedge, I kind of think, with declarative statements, I require. Feel the difference in your posture, your breath, your pulse. That's not confidence you're faking. It's the real thing being excavated. Marcus Aurelius journaled not just thoughts but phrases, polishing his speech like a swordsmith tempers steel. Your words are the first draft of your actions. Edit them ruthlessly. Marcus Aurelius posed a question that cuts deeper with each passing century. What is left of you if you strip away all titles, possessions, and external validation? Most people hear this as an existential challenge, a call to define their core identity. But the Stoics flipped the script to them. The answer wasn't some solitary, polished version of self. It was service. The legacy you imprint on others becomes the truest measure of your existence. Consider the irony of modern philanthropy. Billionaires donating millions for hospital wings bearing their names while quietly slashing employee healthcare benefits. That's not legacy building, its ego preservation with a tax deduction. The Stoics would have called it vanitas in a Gucci suit. Now contrast that with James Stockdale again, the POW who turned his Hanoi Hilton cell into a covert classroom. He didn't survive 7 years of torture to write a best-selling memoir or cash in on speaking fees. He returned home and quietly established the Stoic-inspired Stockdale Leadership Program at the Naval War College. No self-aggrandizing press tours, just officers mentored in resilience year after year, their lessons rippling through fleets and families. That's the Stoic legacy, impact that outlives applause. When Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions but in having few wants," he wasn't praising poverty, he was revealing the freedom to serve without ulterior motives. Your legacy isn't built in grand gestures announced on LinkedIn. It's forged in the invisible moments, the patience you show a struggling coworker, the wisdom you share without keeping score, the small act of integrity when no one's watching. Like a stone dropped in water, these actions create concentric circles of influence you'll never fully trace. The founder who trains their replacement rather than hoarding power. That's Stoic succession planning. The teacher who stays late to help one student grasp a concept. That's Stoic pedagogy. Even the parent who models calm during chaos. That's Stoic leadership in sweatpants. Here's the litmus test. Write 2 versions of your obituary. The first is the polished, public-facing one, the degrees, the promotions, the curated highlights. The second, a private list of names, people who genuinely say, "This person changed the trajectory of my life, not through wealth or fame, but through presence, guidance, or unexpected kindness." The gap between those 2 documents is where your real work lies, so charge your phone, delete one vanity project sucking your time, then ask one person this week, "What's one way I could make your path easier?" Listen without interrupting, act without broadcasting, because the Stoic paradox is this: the less you chase legacy, the more indelibly it takes root. And when the marble crumbles and the gold plaques tarnish, what remains won't be what you took, but what you gave others the strength to become. Motivation is a fickle flame, bright one moment, gone the next. Cleans, the Stoic philosopher who funded his education by hauling water under the scorching sun, knew this better than anyone. While others relied on fleeting bursts of inspiration, he engineered something far more reliable: habit chains. Not just isolated routines, but interlinked actions that pulled him forward like gravity. Picture a blacksmith's apprentice. He doesn't wait for inspiration to strike before heating the forge. His hands move automatically, pumping bellows, gripping tongs, striking steel because repetition has wired the sequence into his muscles. That's the Stoic secret. Discipline isn't about willpower. It's about systems so deeply grooved they become second nature. Modern motivation culture sells a dangerous myth that you need to feel fired up to take action. Scroll through any productivity influencer's feed, and you'll find glossy photos of pre-dawn workouts paired with captions like "Get after it." As if success were a matter of emotional intensity, the Stoics would have rolled their eyes. Marcus Aurelius didn't rule an empire because he woke up every morning buzzing with enthusiasm. He did it because his rituals, journaling at dawn, studying philosophy, reviewing his duties were as non-negotiable as breathing. Research from University College London confirms this. Habits form not through motivation, but through repetition. When a behavior is repeated in the same context consistently, the brain creates neural shortcuts that eventually bypass the need for decision-making altogether. That's why Cleans could study deep into the night after backbreaking labor. His habits carried him when his energy faltered. Here's where most systems fail. They're too complex. The modern obsession with optimization leads to color-coded planners, habit-tracking apps with 17 metrics, and burnout by Wednesday. Clean's method was brutally simple. Identify one keystone habit, a single action that naturally triggers others, and chain everything to it. For him, it was the first draw of water at dawn. That physical act became the anchor for his entire day. Haul water, wash face, study, repeat. No grand plans, just relentless consistency. Stanford behavior scientist B.J. Fogg's research echoes this. Tiny habits, anchored to existing routines, have a 254% higher success rate than ambitious resolutions. Your challenge is surgical. Pick one keystone habit to install this month. Not 10, not even 2, just one. Maybe it's laying out workout clothes the night before. Or placing a book on your pillow each morning so you read before sleep. The key is to piggyback it onto an existing ritual. Already brew coffee at 7 a.m. Use the timer's beep as your cue to write for 5 minutes. The habit should be so small that skipping it feels absurd. That's how you outflank resistance. Clean's genius was recognizing that discipline compounds. That first chain link, the habit of starting, pulls the rest into place. Today, your keystone habit might be 5 push-ups after brushing your teeth. A month from now, it could trigger a full workout. A year from now, it might have reshaped your health, your confidence, your life. But it all begins with one unbroken chain. Forget motivation, build systems, and watch how effortlessly the days begin to bend to your will. Remember that first obstacle, the one that felt like a mountain blocking your path. Look at it now through the lens of 29 Stoic tools. What once seemed like an immovable boulder is now raw material waiting for your chisel. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned his enslavement into a masterclass on freedom, gave us the ultimate battle plan. First say what you'd be, then do what you must. Notice the order. Clarity precedes action. You don't stumble your way into resilience. You declare it, then build it brick by brick. This isn't about memorizing quotes or philosophizing from the sidelines. Stoicism is a contact sport. The obstacles in your life right now, the missed deadline, the strained relationship, the nagging self-doubt aren't theoretical. They're your training ground. So here's the challenge. Before this video ends, pick one tactic from the past minutes and deploy it within the next 24 hours. Not 10, not even 2, 1. Maybe it's the 10-second rule when frustration flares, or the premeditation of evils for that meeting you're dreading. Perhaps it's as simple as rewriting a complaint into a constructive observation. Then do something radical. Mark your calendar 7 days from now, not to evaluate progress, but to report back to yourself, to this community, to the spirit of Epictetus himself. Accountability isn't shackles, it's the scaffolding for growth. The ancient Stoics didn't just journal privately. They gathered in stowers and gardens, sharpening each other like swords on a whetstone. As the screen fades to black, let these words linger. Obstacles obey the resolute, not the gifted, not the lucky, the resolute, the ones who show up, tools in hand, ready to sculpt chaos into order. The mountain hasn't moved, but you're no longer climbing empty-handed. Now,